Seconds. And we're live.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 2022 fifth Big Give. And just to remind everybody, our goal is to raise $50,000, and we have generously received a $50,000 match from our board members. Yeah, we're so excited.
Amazing.
So it would be fabulous if we could reach that goal today. I really think we will. But we kind of have well, you're so special in my eyes, Erika. I don't even know where to start. I was honored enough to be able to spend some really quality time with Erika during conference, and she is just that person that is so knowledgeable, is just so easy to talk to, and super duper smart. And I'm always learning from her. She's very active in our organization. So Erika, she is parent mom to Logan, and she is also a research ambassador, and the list goes on and on and on. But let's first start off, Erika, tell us about Logan. How is he doing? What's going on? I know it's been a bit of a roller coaster, but if you could share a little bit with us, that would be great.
So Logan is now 12, and he's doing really well. We found the right places for him and the right spaces for him. And he's got a team of people that work with him at an autism center instead of going to school. And they love him. He's so safe and taken care of. And so our experiences over the years have been hard in public school, and so we left that space and went to a more specialized space, and it's just been wonderful. They're just a wonderful team. So but we have struggled with one area with Logan in particular, and that is finding consistent speech therapy. We've had really good speech therapists over the years. There's been a couple of them here and there. But when you go to a really large speech facility, there can be quite a bit of staff turnover. And that leads to sort of inconsistent philosophies, ideas, applications of therapy. And then there were just some gaps in my understanding as a parent, what my role was as a parent in that space. So that's all been the big learning process. And so he's doing really well. Logan had a VNS surgery a couple of months ago. His recovery was perfect. It's now turned on. We're not quite at therapeutic level yet, but he's doing really well with the device. And all of his people at his school are doing really well with it. So
one thing you said, Erika, I want to ask is, you talked about the school he goes to. If there are families watching going, I'm not happy, and I personally am not saying public school versus not, this is certainly in a different setting. But if parents are watching and they're like, where are these autism centers she speaks of? This is amazing. Was that a process? Is that expensive? Is that something that's available to people if there's one in their town? Talk a little bit about that.
So there is a process to it, and it can go one of two ways. You can give up on the process and just forge ahead on your own and use your insurance, or cash pay and just forge your own direction. That's what we did. However, there is actually a process within the federal mandate of IDEA for you to have due process, try to work with the schools. If the placement isn't the best place for your child, you as the parent absolutely can stand up for them and say, this isn't the best place. We need a better place. And then you can look for an off-campus placement, and you can shop around for the environment that works best for you. And then if you basically make a little presentation, write a report, and call an IEP meeting and present that to the IEP team and say, this is what I want. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to do this new thing. And so you work together as a team, and there are systems in place for the public school system to pay for it. I myself find the IEP process exhausting, frustrating.
Yeah.
My heart has a really hard time with the language that's used in the IEP process. It really just, it was not the healthiest process. And we just happened to be lucky enough to have locations that take our insurance, and it just worked out that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we withdrew him from school, and he only goes to the autism center. But he keeps school hours, so we call it school.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
and we
And
keep
he's
school
learning. It's
hours.
his school. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's been much safer, right? Not only is the construction and the architecture of the space much safer because it's carpeted, there isn't as much furniture, there's not linoleum and porcelain sinks and like all the things that he could fall and have a seizure and hurt himself. Not that he doesn't fall and hurt himself at school, because right, his seizures are seizures, but it just, right, if it's a better space, it's a better space. And so if you have ideas, if you go to a few places and you're like, I love this special program or this special school, work with your IEP team, start there and see if it's a process that you can handle. But if you can't, you be brave and you say, I can't handle this and I want to find a different way to do this. And insurance can absolutely be that way.
Erika, I think it's so important. Thank you for bringing up placement. And I mean, it is our kids, you know, sometimes they don't have the best balance, and then you throw in the seizures and the low tone. We kind of had a similar situation. And interestingly enough, the school was a bit afraid to approach me on a more restrictive placement. But just because a placement is more restrictive does not necessarily mean like they can still get their needs met elsewhere, even if it's not in your own community, because there's other ways to incorporate your child into the community. So it was interesting after we finally had this open conversation, it's like the floodgates opened and it was just such a healthy type of communication, you know? So it's tricky, right? That communication piece is a fine balance, but you know what? At the end of the day, we are our kids' voices. And that's what I'm hearing from you with your situation with Logan.
And I didn't give up on the public school system, even though my son isn't registered in public school. I wanted to make the process better for other families here in my community. So I have been a sitting member of the Special Education Parent Advisory Board for our school district for 6 years. I don't have a registered student, but I am still a parent that represents the community, because least restrictive environment is a really good example. That is a phrase, a 3-word phrase that comes right out of a legal document written by the federal government. And it has a lot of meaning behind all of those words. And it has sort of morphed into lots of different personal understandings of what least restrictive environment means. But it unfortunately has strayed a little bit away from the intent. And that is, it doesn't mean take Logan and put him into a general education classroom at the expense of everyone else for his seizures, which are loud and dangerous and disruptive, right? It doesn't mean that. It means the best place for him. That's the least restrictive space for him. And so I think that that's one of those things where I like to sit on that school board to be that voice, because I'm on the other side of it. And I do respect the teachers. Public school is a wonderful system when it's functional and healthy. But I think sometimes we get stuck under words like least restrictive environment, and everybody ends up pigeonholing themselves into corners. And all of a sudden the staff has no power, the parent has no power, the child has no power, like everybody's powerless, but they're like, oh, but this is least restrictive, you know.
Erika, I want to remind people watching this that we have an IEP help ticket in case families are hearing IEP and process and get, school age and you know what. Don't forget, for parents who don't know about this, on our website under parent resources, you'll find it says IEP help ticket. If you're stuck, we've got a team of volunteers who have been through this. They're mostly parents of dupers, but many of them bring in expertise that you would, if you had to pay for, you'd be spending a lot of money for this type of advocacy that they can provide. But they are volunteering their services to give you advice. So please feel free to use that ticket. We do have it used regularly, but I want to make sure parents know, because there's some resources we have that may be lost sometimes because some people don't have hours to spend to try to find what we can offer. So thank you. I'm so glad you brought that up. But just as a quick reminder. So, and then Ember, I know you've got a
learning.
yeah.
It's a big learning curve. There's so many new words. And if you, like my life before being a parent, I was just a creative person. My jobs were I was just creating things. I created websites. I managed programs. I just created things. That's all I did. I wasn't a scientist. I wasn't a lawyer. I didn't understand really how public school really functioned. I mean, I was a student and went to public school, but just a passenger amongst, in the system. When you're typically developing, you don't really learn how a lot of that system works. But be really gentle with yourself. And if you don't know what a word is, just find a parent that you can talk to behind the scenes and say, what is due process? I don't understand. Just ask those questions, because nobody goes into it with a 5-year-old non-speaking child with autism. And it's like, oh, I totally know how an IEP works. Nobody says that. Nobody. It's even people who are teachers who have children who are in special education struggle to sit on both sides. So just be really gentle with yourself. That's the best advice I can give. And just know it's going to be a long process of learning for everybody. So
Erika, this is probably the perfect segue, because you said you're not a researcher, even though in my eyes you kind of are, or a scientist. But can you tell us about your newest adventure? Well, it's been a road, but you did it. Can you share about that and what impacted you to study what you have been studying and focusing on?
Yeah. So I always wanted to be an academic. I always wanted to be a scientist, but my life just threat. I just made different decisions and I ended up in a different place. And then I became a mom, and this life has been amazing and confusing and exciting. And but I wanted some very specific things for Logan that I couldn't find them. I've been looking and I couldn't find it. And so I thought, he doesn't spend any more time with anybody more than he does us. So I'm going to do it myself. So I went back to school, and I got my bachelor's degree in psychology with a focus on child and adolescent development. And now I'm in grad school. I'm in a master's of science program to become a speech language pathologist. And I have a lot of interest in becoming a researcher. So I live in a very rural community, so it'll involve us moving to a more urban area near a university. But it has been wonderful. I have absolutely loved learning about the science and research of speech, what universities are researching. It took me a really long time to understand it, but I've loved it. I've loved the process. Grad school is really hard. I'm like in over my head every single day, but I love it. And
that scares me, because I don't believe that, Erika. I spent some time with you. I don't imagine you get it over your head.
I always feel like, oh, you did it. You put your foot in it. Now you got to do it. Yeah, it's been exciting. And so I'm now in my official grad studies portion. So I'll be doing that for a year. And then I'll do a year of clinical fellowship where you work in some clinical placements in your community for a year, and you accumulate hours. And then I'm slotted to graduate in December of 2023.
Erika, I want to be honest for a second. Sorry, Ember.
No.
I got excited. I was like,
I was getting excited too.
Well, here, I'll ask mine quickly. I'm thinking that it's interesting because a parent that's watching this may think she's got this all together. She has got this all together. She's in school. She's a duper. Many people saw your post this past week about what was going on with your son. how do you do it all? How do you balance this? Because I don't want people to think that they're not doing something right because you make it look a little easy. What's your balance? How do you do this?
I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is I am not in control of much. I don't have a lot of control over Logan's health. It is what it is. Um, do I wish other things? Yeah, I wish other things. There's a lot of what ifs, in your head, but it's not very useful to spend a lot of time in that headspace. It can be really destructive to your mommy heart, and it can be really destructive to
Wow.
your relationships with your partner or your community, or a job. Those sort of things can eat away at who you are. So I just sort of remind myself that I don't have a lot of power, and this life is really short, and there are no bad days. Even there are hard days, but there are no bad days. And just meet every single day with that expectation that I'm not really in control of much of what's going on. I set really high goals for myself, and I work really hard to do those things, but I absolutely would not be able to balance all of this on my own. So I'm really lucky to have a partner that helps me juggle, thing, and we've built a life that, handles this well. He's self-employed, and so we do have a lot of control over our availability and our time. So I think that plays a big role in me being able to balance things.
Yeah.
I think if we worked outside of the house, I think that is very complex families. And so my heart, I really give a shout out to people that work outside of the home and are balancing more relationships than what I balance in just, my four walls. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I know our time's almost up. Ember, did we
Oh
get through
gosh,
all
already.
of our questions? I
Oh,
interrupted. I get excited.
I know. I was just thinking, a lot of our kids have these challenges with language and speech
yeah.
and regression. Is there anything you have learned in your studies that any kind of advice or hope that or anything you've learned that relates more directly to our population of kids?
Yes. And this is funny. I just read this last week in one of my courses. There was a paper written in 2017 by Devaney and Hageman, where they were researching the benefits of parent implemented interventions versus clinician directed service. So basically,
Okay.
parents receiving training to deliver speech therapy on their own versus taking your child to speech therapy for 1 or 2 sessions a week for a period of time. And they found that despite what the quote is despite limitations in the number of published studies, support exists for the idea that interventions provided by either parents or clinicians can effectively improve language even for late talkers. And parent implemented interventions may be more effective than clinician directed service provisions. I think that's an important takeaway. And I think that it reminded me of my individual experience that when Logan was in speech therapy and going really intensively, I really thought that he was learning something in the speech sessions himself and was taking those things away and then was applying them out in the world. And that really isn't what's happening with our kids. I am there learning, and I am I'm the one who has the takeaways, and then we go home and I implement those things in Logan's main environment, the space that he lives 99% of the rest of his life in, other environments, not in speech therapy. So if he, had a speech therapist at home, then he might, have more input, more like focused input for it. But the parents are the ones who can empower themselves. So there are parent training programs like the Hannon The Hannon program is a great example of that, where you go and you do an intensive program over a period of time, and the parent gets a whole bunch of training, and then you go home and you live your life and you implement those things that you learned how to do. The science has shown that that is equal to or more effective than speech therapy. So if you live in an
Wow.
area that
Yeah.
doesn't have good access to speech therapy, read books, take online courses, find programs, and instead of going on vacation, do that.
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is participate in the ladder database. That data is priceless, absolutely priceless for researchers.
Yeah.
Basically, what it does is it does two things. I see it working two ways. One, when you're in the parent support groups and you're like, I wonder how many kids with Duke 15 don't talk. I wonder how many kids with Duke 15q have seizures. That data exists in the ladder database. So if I'm a researcher and I'm sitting in my class and I have a paper that I need to turn in, and I have to look up some data on special populations, the ladder database is where I would go to pull
Mhm.
data to write a research paper. So it works both ways. So I encourage families to, take it. It doesn't take that long. It's like less than a half an hour, and you upload all their information and it's done and your part is done. But then that data exists out there just waiting to be plucked. So it's our way to plant seeds for future researchers to have, crops to pull from.
Well, Erika, we didn't even ask you, I don't think, to say that. And we've been in the last last hour, we were with Vanessa and we talked about, we'll even go back and say to families, just register. Like it takes 1 minute to register to at least help our numbers show up on the dashboard so that we can help pharma see more and more how important this data is. Sorry, I have a kiddo that entered my room. Hold on one second. Hold on. If y'all can see how cute he is with his baseball. Stefan.
This is real life here.
Real life. Real life.
Adorable.
Hold on one second, baby. So Ember, will you take us out while I help the kid here?
Wait, what am I? Oh, okay.
You close us out,
Yeah.
and I'll attend to my child.
Yes. Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to kind of dovetail off of that because when Brendan was younger, and I don't know if you agree or disagree with this, but the place where we were doing our speech therapy, they had block programs. So essentially, instead of like going to speech, like maybe once a week for 1 hour, we did these 6-week blocks, intensive treatments where we would go for 2 hours a day, 5 days a week. So I would go and I would sit in there with him. And I feel like it's like anything. We're modeling for our kids without even realizing it sometimes. And I was, although my certification is not as a speech language pathologist, but like I would go home and naturally, like what you're kind of referencing, I feel like I just was doing what they were doing in those sessions, but just in our home environment when we're out in the community. So is that something similar to what you were just talking about, Erika?
Yeah. As the parent, you, like I said, your mind sort of shifts over the years as you come to terms with the diagnosis itself and the reality of your child's development. Like that grows over time. So you as a parent, your role will shift a little bit, but you're learning too. You're taking notes, you're learning new methods, you're taking them home, you're implementing them in the environment. Yeah, that's exactly it. I think the intensiveness would be really useful because it's hard to, go once a week to speech therapy and have a lot of takeaways
Right.
in just,
Yeah.
60 minutes a week or whatever. But
I'm sorry, I didn't realize the time. I just like sometimes get into these conversations and,
Me too. And sorry for my child interruption. He's looking for something important, so we had to pause that. Erika, thank you so much. We have feedback on Facebook that says really super helpful. Thank you so much. Great session. And people can always come back and watch this. So thank you. And then Ember, I think we have up next Stormy Chamberlain. So this is going to be an exciting time. And Erika, just to circle again too, thank you for what you give to the community. I see so many fantastic posts from you.
Yes.
I've had people say, who is that? She's so smart. And I'm like, yes, she is smart. So thank you for jumping in and just the extra miles you put in as a mom too. So thank you.
Well, thank hosting the event. This is a great event, and I hope people show up and we reach our donation goals, because that match would be amazing.
It
So,
would be,
Yeah.
it would be. So
Yeah.
thank you. And we'll be back in just a few minutes
Okay.
with Stormy Chamberlain. So thank you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
goodbye.